Hey everyone, today I wanted to give you a quick feature demo of automatic rollback and surgical rollback. These are two features that allow you to have a bit of a safety net when you're making configuration changes to routers or network devices in a remote location. The scenario that we like to present is this one where you are connecting over the network to a remote site, to a local manager, going through a console port and making changes on a router. Then on that router, somehow you shut down that outside interface, bring the network down, you lose your connection to the local manager. So what do we do in that situation where you were in there making changes and suddenly your session just disappeared? Well, if you have automatic rollback enabled, we will detect what changes you made and roll those back for you. And surgical rollback comes into play when it looks at those changes and puts back just the pieces that you change. We don't just push down the entire previous running config and hope for the best. We look at exactly what has changed and we make those changes, we undo those changes specifically for you. So here we have Secure CRT. I've got two windows open, both SSH sessions to the same local manager. The reason I have two is because on the right here, I want to show you what is happening in the background. To do that, we're going to use the terminal shadow command. This is a great command to use when you're troubleshooting interaction between the local manager and the devices. So terminal shadow, get that running. You're going to see here in a second the automated functions starting, the monitoring, show proc CPU, show memfree, things like that. Just the kind of the basic monitoring that happens when you have an advanced driver enabled on a port. On the left over here, you can see that going now. On the left, I'm going to go to port 11. I'm going to type T for terminal, and I'm going to log in to the box. And I'll press return to get started. You need to know how to get into your box since the local manager is going to log you out of it so that unauthorized people can't piggyback on its service account. Little feature there that can be turned on and off depending on your needs. So I'm going to make an arbitrary change to this router. I'm going to do a config T. I'm going to change the host name to SAT core. Now this router lives in San Antonio, and I'm going to tilde enter to get out of here. I log out of the device. On the left, you can see it's logging out of device, and that CLI just kind of sits there. But on the right, you can see that something's happening behind the scenes. The local manager has logged you out, your user, out of the router and has logged back in as itself, as the functional or service account. And it's pulling the running config so that it can see what has changed. And it shows you here on the left that the changes made in the current terminal session are satcore has been added and the host name oscore has been removed. That's just a simple change that we want to undo. So I'm going to say roll back immediately. Now, if I walked away from my desk, eventually my session would have timed out and this process would have started automatically. And then after that point, I would have had 75 more seconds to then commit the changes or roll them back. If I don't do anything here, it's just going to roll them back automatically. But I can go ahead and hit that R and it'll roll back the changes. On the right, you can see what's happening in the background. We're running some commands to try to figure out how we're going to copy the undo file over. In this case, we're using Xmodem, but it can really depend on what kind of device you have. TFTP, FTP, things like that can move files over as well. So you can see that we copy via Xmodem a staging running config. This running config contains just the pieces that I changed. So it's probably got in there just the words hostname oscore. So you put those, that transfers over. There's a little bit of a timeout here, a wait as we make sure that the file has been pushed over, but then you'll see things start to move again. We move that file over, and now we're going to merge it with the running config. If you look at it there, you can see we have a no hostname satcore and a hostname oscore. So we actually go that extra mile to make sure that satcore gets removed, but either way. So we merge the files together, we write them to memory, we verify that the file has the right MD5 hash on it, I think, there. And then we start with our monitoring. Start resuming the monitoring that we were doing before this. So you can see that our prompt has changed back to OSCore. On the left, we've some feedback there. We did a write memory and we saved the running config as the current. So we're back up and running the way we were prior to making that change. So that's pretty simple, right? Just changing the host name. But to really kind of demonstrate what happens in this weird, you take down the network scenario, we can do it, go back into the terminal session. It'll log us out. We have to log back in. Uplogix, super secret password, enable super secret password. And if I do a show IP int brief, let's pretend that Gigabit Ethernet 01 is the link that is providing us the access to the local manager. So we're coming in through this router to hit the local manager and doubling back over the serial to actually manage the router. So if I do a config t and I do an int g01 and I do a shut, if we were actually using that interface to talk to the local manager, coming over SSH, that would have killed my session immediately. We can simulate that by coming here and doing disconnect. So let's disconnect from the left. On the right, things start moving immediately because we can detect that SSH session has disappeared. The local manager takes over, logs you out of your session, since that serial session was still kind of active, but the SSH session has disappeared, pulls the running config, compares it to what it had previously, and it will see that it has a change on Gigabit Ethernet 01 that has issued a no shut. So, or that I issued a shut before. So it's going to issue a no shut on that using surgical rollback. Pushing down the previous config would have done nothing here because no shutdown is not, it's one of those default values that's not included in a running config. So we actually have to say no shut, and that's what it's doing in the staging running config. Here's that piece where it pauses just a minute. Xmodem can be kind of finicky, so we have to build in these little delays just to make sure that things work. But in a second here, it's going to do a more, I believe, and it's going to show us the exact piece that it's pushing down. You can see that it does an interface Gigabit Ethernet 01, no shutdown. It's right there if you can see it. And it's going to merge that into the currently running config. As soon as that's been done, it's going to do a write mem, and that interface will now come back up, and we should see in a second here the log message, unless we turned off logging already. So once that's done and that interface is back up, it resumes its normal monitoring. So if I go, there it is, line protocol on VLAN 1 is back up, so I think that's what was connected to Gigi 01. And so now functionality or access is now restored. So if I come back here, I go back to my port 11 and I do a show run, I can see that Gigabit Ethernet no longer has a shut, Gigabit Ethernet 01 no longer has a shut, and if I term in and actually get into this device, you gotta type the super secret password correctly or it doesn't like that. So uplogix super secret password and enable super secret password again, and if I do a show IP int brief, you can see that it's up and up. If I do a show run, you can see that there's no there's going to be no shutdown command in the Gigabit Ethernet 01. So that's a pretty straightforward demonstration of how that feature works, right? So we're sitting there watching what you're doing on that router all the time. If you are disconnected, if you walk away, if something happens and you're not able to explicitly say, I want these changes to be part of the running config, we'll roll them back for you. This can really save some time if you do bring down the network with a little bit of a typo or something. Often this kind of recovery, as you saw, takes less than 60 seconds to do, gets you back up to where you were before you started making changes. So it's one of the cooler things we like to demo because it's just so useful. It's just one of those things that man, if you don't have it and you've isolated a network site and now you got to roll a truck, oh, that's going to be a pain. So hope you enjoyed that. I'll do some more demo videos a little bit later, but let me know if you have any questions. hello@uplogics.com, or call into our support line. Guys will be happy to answer any questions.